Humans eat cows, pigs, chickens, fish, goats. We eat animals that spend their lives in mud, animals that eat things we would never touch. In some parts of the world, people even eat rodents. But say one word and watch what happens. Rat. Suddenly, the idea of dinner disappears. Put a steak next to a rat, and most people don't need time to think about which one belongs on the plate. Their brain decides instantly. One is food, the other is disgusting. But why? Because biologically speaking, a rat is still an animal. It has muscles, it has fat, it has meat. Humans have eaten rats and other rodents in different places and circumstances throughout history. So the question isn't whether a rat is physically edible. The question is why so many of us feel like eating one is unthinkable. And the obvious answer seems easy. They're dirty. They live in sewers. They crawl through garbage. They spread disease. Case closed, except it isn't. Because plenty of animals we eat can live in dirt, carry parasites, or come into contact with things we'd rather not think about. Yet somehow, we don't react to them the same way. A pig covered in mud can still become bacon. A fish can feed on things hidden beneath murky water and still become dinner. But a rat? For many people, even imagining it on a plate is enough to trigger disgust. And that's where the real mystery begins. Because maybe we don't avoid rats simply because they're bad food. Maybe, somewhere along the way, humans taught their brains to see them as something else entirely. And once that happened, the rat stopped being just an animal. It became a warning. Calling rats dirty feels like the obvious answer. They crawl through garbage. They hide in sewers. They can invade homes and contaminate food. For centuries, humans have associated them with disease, waste, and infestation. So surely that's why we don't eat them. Except there's a problem. Dirty is not a biological category. An animal doesn't become inedible simply because it gets muddy. Pigs roll in mud. Chickens scratch through dirt. Fish can live in murky water and feed on things most people would never want to see. Wild animals can carry parasites. Livestock can carry bacteria. And yet, those facts don't automatically remove them from the menu. Because before food reaches our plate, it passes through something else first. Our perception. Take two animals. One lives on a farm. The other lives behind a restaurant, searching through a pile of trash. They might both be biologically capable of carrying disease. Both might need to be handled and cooked safely. But your brain won't see them the same way. One has been placed inside the category called food. The other has been placed inside a completely different category, contamination. And once that label attaches itself to an animal, it can become incredibly difficult to remove. The rat doesn't just look like something that might be unsafe to eat. For many people, it looks like the thing that makes food unsafe. That's a very different relationship. A cow can be a source of dinner. A rat can be the thing hiding inside the grain. A chicken can belong in a coop. A rat can belong somewhere you don't want to find it. So maybe dirt isn't the answer after all. Maybe the real question is much deeper. When did humans stop seeing the rat as an animal and start seeing it as a pest? So if rats aren't automatically disqualified by biology and dirty doesn't explain everything, then something strange is happening before we ever take a bite. Because humans don't look at every animal and ask the same question. Can I eat this? Most of the time, we've already decided. A cow walks past and we see food. A dog walks past and we might see family. A lion appears and we see a predator. A rat runs across the floor and suddenly the reaction is completely different. Pest. That's the invisible food line. The strange thing is that none of these categories exist in nature. A cow doesn't know it's livestock. A dog doesn't know it's a pet. And a rat doesn't know it's a pest. Those labels exist inside human societies. We create them. Then, over generations, they begin to feel so natural that we forget they were ever choices. That's why two animals can be biologically similar, yet trigger completely different reactions. One can be raised, sold, cooked, and served at a restaurant. The other can make an entire room panic if it appears near the kitchen. And once an animal crosses into the category of pest, everything changes. You stop asking how much meat it contains. You stop wondering how it tastes. You don't see a potential meal. You see something that shouldn't be there. Something invading your space. Something threatening your food. And that psychological shift may be more powerful than any biological fact. Because the rat didn't just fail to become food. Somewhere along the way, it became the opposite. And once an animal becomes the thing you want to keep away from your dinner, it's hard to imagine ever putting it on the plate. But the rat didn't become a pest simply because humans found it disgusting. There was something much more practical happening. For thousands of years, humans worked hard to collect food. We hunted animals, we gathered plants. Eventually, we learned how to farm, harvest grain, and store enough food to survive the seasons ahead. And then came the rat. Wherever humans built settlements, rats often found something even more valuable than shelter: our food. A field of grain could feed a family. A storehouse could keep a village alive through winter. But to a rat, that same storehouse was an open buffet. Suddenly, the relationship changed. This wasn't an animal living somewhere far away in the wilderness. It was living beside us, eating the food we had already worked to collect. And from a human perspective, that matters. A cow eats food, but we control the cow. A chicken eats food, but we raise it. A rat eats food without asking. It sneaks into homes, it damages stores, it contaminates supplies. And the more humans built cities and stored food in larger quantities, the more opportunities rats had to follow, so the animal slowly changed in our minds. First, it was just another creature. Then, it became a competitor. And eventually, it became a pest. That's a powerful transformation, because once you see an animal as something stealing your dinner, you stop seeing it as a possible dinner itself. The rat was no longer a resource. It was a threat to the resource. And that may explain why humans learned to hate having rats around. But competition still doesn't explain everything, because plenty of animals compete with us. And yet, we don't feel sick just imagining them on a plate. So something deeper had to happen, something that turned the rat from a competitor into a symbol of disgust. And this is where the story leaves history and enters your brain. Because rats don't just make many people feel cautious, they make them feel disgusted. And disgust is powerful. You don't need to study the animal. You don't need to calculate the risks. Sometimes one glimpse is enough. A rat runs across the floor, and your body reacts before logic has time to speak. You step back. You feel uncomfortable. You suddenly don't want to touch anything nearby. That's because disgust isn't simply the feeling of thinking something looks ugly. It's a reaction closely tied to contamination. The human brain is constantly scanning the world for things that might make us sick. Rotting food, parasites, bodily waste, decay. And anything strongly associated with those things can trigger an immediate response. Over time, rats became wrapped up in that entire mental category. Not just an animal, a sign that something is wrong. A rat in the kitchen doesn't make you wonder what it tastes like. It makes you wonder what it touched, what it contaminated, what might now be unsafe. And once that association becomes strong enough, it can overpower everything else. You can tell someone that an animal is edible. You can tell them it has been eaten somewhere. You can even explain that not every rat lives in a sewer, but their brain may have already made the decision, not food. That may be the real power of disgust. It doesn't wait for evidence. It creates the feeling of danger first, then leaves your rational mind trying to catch up. But here's the part that changes everything. Not everyone saw rats this way. And once you realize that, the entire argument starts to fall apart. But here's the problem with everything we've said so far. The idea that humans simply don't eat rats isn't actually true. Not everywhere, not throughout history, and not under every circumstance. Humans have eaten various rodents in different parts of the world. In some places, certain species have been hunted, trapped, and cooked as food. In others, rodents have been raised specifically for meat, which means something important. Rodent isn't automatically the same as not food, and that changes the entire mystery. Because if an animal can be dinner in one place and disgusting in another, then the answer can't be hiding entirely inside the animal itself. A creature doesn't suddenly become biologically edible when it crosses a border. Its muscles don't change. Its meat doesn't change. What changes is the way humans see it. And that's where the invisible food line becomes impossible to ignore. In one society, an animal may be a resource. In another, it may be a pest. In another, it may be a pet. The biology can remain almost identical while the meaning changes completely. So perhaps rats were never universally banned from the human menu. Instead, different human communities made different decisions about them based on environment, history, necessity, available food, and cultural habits. And once those habits lasted long enough, they stopped feeling like decisions. They started feeling obvious. That's why asking someone to eat a rat can feel so shocking. You're not just asking them to try a new animal. You're asking them to cross a boundary their brain may have been building for generations. And that leads to the final realization. Maybe the real reason we don't eat rats isn't that rats are impossible to eat. Maybe the answer was never sitting inside the rat. Maybe it was sitting inside us.